Now it's on? Yes.
Okay, can you hear
Hello,
me?
world.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So, it's Luca.
I am Luca. I work for Microsoft. I maintain DPDK in Debian, and I am one of the LTS maintainers. I did 16.11, the second half. I'll be doing 19.11 in a couple of months. Yes! Autographs later.
Hi, I'm Kevin Traynor, so I work for Red Hat. So I maintain the 18.11 branch, and I previously maintained 18.08. Okay, so we just want to give an update, I guess, about... I guess we just want to give... No, you haven't seen the slides yet. Just want to give an update about LTS, how things have gone for the last year, just a few bits and bobs. Okay, so the first thing is just a recap of why we have an LTS. So it's easy to start talking about an LTS and forget why we have it. So users can be broadly kind of categorized as users who want latest functionality and maybe a little bit of risk is okay, and users who want stability. So they don't want anything new, but what they really need is stability, so no regressions. Okay, and DPDK provides two types of releases to cater for these people. So we've got the master releases, which has the latest features. It also has fixes, of course. And we've got the LTS releases, which have fixes only. And just to look at the number of patches since DPDK 18.11 release. So on the master branch, there's been over 3,000 commits, a mixture of features and bug fixes. On the 18.11 stable branch, 900 commits, fixes only. And we don't have an official motto, but if we had a motto, it would be don't make it worse. And what we mean by that is, if a user has 18.11.2 and they move to 18.11.3, we have to make sure that there's no regressions there. If there's an existing bug in 18.11.2 and it doesn't get fixed till 18.11.4 or 5, that could be okay. But the main thing is we don't have regressions. So we want to have users to have zero fear. It would be a failure maybe of LTS if users are saying, well, I moved from 18.11.2 to 18.11.3 and things broke, so I'm not moving on. The whole idea is that there's incremental bug fixes and the users can keep going.
And perception is fundamental in this field, so yes.
Yep, okay. So just on numbers, I guess a question. So which code has the most bugs? No, that's a great joke.
Not mine.
No. So the point is the new code has the most bugs. All right, so that's the kind of conventional wisdom. So new code goes in. It takes a while to get road tested. This is totally normal. I think everyone kind of intuitively knows this. It takes a while to get road tested, to get kind of quite solid. So you can see between 3,000 commits and 900 commits, you would intuitively say that the DPDK 11 branch is more stable. Okay, so thinking of that kind of like, oh, well, we all know that new code has more bugs and that they need to get fixed. I wanted to try and do some kind of stat to see if that actually played out with the bug fixes in DPDK. So if you look at the graph on the right here, or left for you, so we can see this is when a bug has been fixed, how old was the bug? So when was that bug introduced? What's the delta between the bug fix, so the bug and the fix being introduced? And we can see it in kind of months from 3 to 78 of all the bugs that have been fixed from after 18.11 in master branch. So we can see the vast majority of them are over maybe the first 15 to 18 months, and it quickly ramps down. Okay, so who was working on DPDK 78 months ago? Okay, so you put some bugs still in. Okay, okay, so this one, then I thought, well, maybe DPDK has grown an awful lot, so this isn't really fair. The code base was probably way smaller 78 months ago than it was 3 months ago. So I normalized it against code size. And again, it still shows that the latest code is the ones where bugs come in and bugs are fixed. But the important thing is bugs are fine as long as the fixes are coming in, and it's a good sign, it's healthy that things happen, things break, things get fixed. You know, I mean, perhaps you could suggest that some of the older code maybe isn't fully there anymore, some of it's been replaced, so that could be one anomaly. But I guess just the idea that new code the new features, the new invasive features, especially in master, we don't take them into stable.
So let's talk about for a moment a bit of a retrospective. So what happened, what's happening, what's going to happen. 1611, rest in peace. Our favorite release was end of life on February, was maintained for 2 and a bit years. It was done in the first half by Yunnan. Our thanks go to him. He moved on to newer projects since then. 1711 continued. It's going quite well. Young Seok maintained until now, and now he as well is moving to new projects. So I will be doing the last 2 releases until this final rest in place in November. And 1811 was started, maintained by Kevin. It's going very well as well. What else happened? We used to have short-term releases or short-term stable releases or stable releases. Those small .1 releases that happen after every mainline one. Now, we decided this year to stop doing those for a variety of reasons. The first and main reason was bandwidth. We did not have enough validation bandwidth, maintainers bandwidth to take care of them. And also, it seemed like there was not much interest in them, and not much use. So we put out some calls for maintainership, for validation, for volunteers, but nothing happened, so we decided to drop them. And that was quite a big change, but now we can focus a bit more on the LTS trees. More LTS usage, more users, more validation, more focus is good for us, and it means they have a higher priority for both maintainers, developers, and validation teams, and end users especially. And I can, for example, share that for the Microsoft validation team, LTSs are the #1 priority, not mainline releases. So when the validation team needs to pick and schedule their work, first they will always look at LTSs. Because we know our customers are going to jump on LTSs first and slowly moving to our mainline later on. One other very important thing that we are trying to get better at, and we had problems in the past, was to keep it to our schedule. For example, 1611.9 was delayed by 3-4 months. That happened again because of stalls in the validation pipeline. So we had to wait a long time before we had enough validation and confidence to say, yes, we can ship this. We are trying to get better there and to be more strict. So we do our calls for validation when we publish our release candidate on the mail list. But we try to stay true to the deadlines that we announced there. And if you give us test results, they're great, fantastic. If not, then we just go on and release it.
Yeah, just one thing to add is that so getting rid of the stable releases, if you added up all the validation cycles, say the previous year, it's 16, and getting rid of 1 validation cycle for each of those 4 releases of master during the year. So you've reduced you've gone from 16 to 12 validations. So it hopefully eases things a little bit for some of the validation teams, because they were very under pressure, and especially when after a master release, there could be 2 or 3 LTSs and stables kind of all arriving at the same time for them to validate.
Yep. So other things we're doing in terms of process, so we're getting better our release notes. We had known issues and fixes not backported. We try to document them as best as we can. Now, of course, we need the help from the community to do that, and from the validation and developers and sub-tree maintainers. We try to credit the companies that work with us doing the validation, so they will get mentioned along with what they tested and what they verified in their release notes, so that their customers, if they go to the upstream release notes, they will see, okay, this was validated by Intel on this platform, this was validated by Microsoft on Azure, and so on. In terms of tooling, we use a few things to help us when we back our patches, like we use Travis. It was presented before. We use the very same workflow there, with our branches where we push the patches that are being backported. We use the OpenSUSE build service as well. This allows us to test out quite large matrix of distribution versus architecture versus distribution versions. That gives us a bit more confidence. Our commits on the stable branches are pushed to the Git stable repository and also to GitHub. So you will see in your backport emails or in our emails that we send when we backport something, the link to that patch, so it's easier to consume and to check.
Yeah, just to say, and the reason for that is because if we had to do some rebasing ourselves, we were sending like diffs of diffs in an email, and they were kind of hard to consume for people and to understand. So now we have, we will have a branch. You can check out the code and see how your patch has fitted in there, or just click on the link in the email and you'll see it in GitHub.
Yep, that is very useful, and we hope it will be helpful for developers that help us maintain these releases. And then finally, as mentioned before, we rely on various companies represented here to do the validation on these releases. We could not do without them. So as mentioned, IBM, Intel, Mellanox, Microsoft, and Red Hat have helped us a lot along the way, and as well as OVS and DPDK user consumers.
Okay, and next year we'd like to see more there. Okay, so just in terms of LTS fixes, this isn't really a comparison between them, but I suppose the key takeaway, if you look at the left-hand side, is the amount of commits. So any of these releases have, where they are now, have more than 750 commits. Like we changed the process a bit as we went along in the early days, so probably 16.11 is going to end up being lower. If we look at the fixes per release, obviously, DPDK 18.11 is quite higher now because it's the latest one, so pretty much all the bugs will actually, or most of the bugs fixes will go back to it. Whereas as the LTS ages, those backports maybe aren't relevant or just won't go back. But I suppose the key takeaway is not really the comparison, but just the fact that all of these anytime there's an LTS, it's getting lots of bug fixes.
So given 16.11 is now end of life, but it will always be in my heart, I wanted to show some stats about it. So here you will see just the number of commits per release. Now, a few things to notice here. First of all, well, the CV release was just bespoke, so it can be ignored. But it's funny to notice how the release that corresponds to the mainline August release is always the one with fewer commits. And I can assume because that happens in summer, and we all prefer to be in a beer garden rather than doing DPDK bug fixes, which is fair enough. And also, you would expect the number of commits, as Kevin just said, to go down in time because fewer and fewer mainline commits apply to another LTS. But what happened about halfway through here is that we changed the process slightly to be more inclusive of bug fixes. So that's why it balanced a bit, and you still see the latest release with comparable numbers of commits from the previous ones. And finally, something interesting to note, this very readable slide shows over the entire lifetime of 16.11, where the highest number of lines of code changed for which area. So we can see that the net PMDs absolutely dominate over everything else, with over 60% of the lines of code changed. And then we have some in the libraries as well, less than 20%, and all the various things. And now, this might mean many things. It might mean that the Broadcom and Intel developers are really through with the bug fixes, and they help us a lot, and they do their due diligence there, or maybe they are just adding tens of thousands of PCI IDs every month. I don't know. Who can tell? Okay,
so I don't really know what that word means, but Jens assured me he said it's a real word, but you won't find it in any dictionary. Okay, but I think the gist of it is that is about trying to by making something worse by trying to improve it. Okay, that's what we want to make sure we avoid in the LTS. So one of the things that keeps getting kind of brewing up through different patches is about adding features into LTS. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I guess, when you think of features in LTS, you say, well, okay, stability of LTS, new features, this is perfect. So the cake and eat it release. But the problem is it depends on what those features are and how they fit in. So you could very easily have your kind of no cake and hungry. So you don't really have the latest features, but you don't have your stability because you've made invasive changes. And so we don't want that to happen, obviously, because Jim talked about the LTS becoming more popular, and a sign of maturity. And the only thing it really has is stability. So it doesn't offer anything else. So stability through API, ABI, which may change in time and master, and stability through not introducing new features and not introducing invasive changes. Okay, so yeah, so I guess the thing is, if we started to introduce new features and invasive features, the consumer who, or the user who was using master doesn't really care. They'll still use master. You know, maybe some new people would move from master to that new release, but the user who actually wants that stability doesn't have anything anymore. Okay, so that's what we want to try and avoid. So, and in terms of bug fix, so we're talking about fixing existing functionality or features. Okay, so wishful thinking absolutely doesn't count. You know, I really wish feature X was also in because I feel it's needed. That doesn't really count. Of course, there can be grey areas, so that we can't make a rule to say this is in, this is out. Everything really has to be judged. So in terms of balancing stability, like on a scale of bad to not as bad, I mean, changing ABI would obviously be a big no-no for the LTS. So if someone wants to change like the membuff library or the eatdev library, again, that would be a very difficult thing for LTS to accept, because you know maybe vendor X has done something with their NIC, they need some changes here, but there could be a lot of other users who are using a completely different vendor who end up getting affected and maybe get some regressions because of it. I suppose potentially if the change is within a single vendor, at least they're not, you know, they can't introduce regressions to other people, so that's maybe not quite as bad. I would say obvious code that's not going to, and this is what's hard to kind of put like a black and white thing around, but like obvious code, like someone's added a new case statement or something like that. Okay, so a new PMD. So if a new PMD can slot in seamlessly through a plugin, again, that's something that shouldn't have an effect on existing PMDs, shouldn't have an effect on any other vendors. And then, of course, maybe something like a new PCI ID. So if the driver was the same, but it just needed a new PCI ID, it seems reasonable. It seems like it wouldn't cause new regressions. But the key factors are the invasiveness of the change, and then the commitment to validate and support from the committer or the company. But the key thing is don't make it worse. Okay, so we don't want to get regressions.
So how can you help? Well, first of all, please test our RCs. We always send our announcement emails to dev.dpdk.org with the link to the code and the deadlines there. Please help us if you use DPDK, deploy DPDK, especially deploy the stable releases, help us there. Share the results with us on the mailing list, not just individually, but on the mailing list so that everybody can see them. And then we will add them to the release notes. As developers, please make sure you use the cc stable at dpdk.org and the fixes tag for your patches when you think the patch is a good candidate for the LTS, so that our automation can then automatically bring them in and we can look at them. Because if that doesn't happen, we have to do that manually and it's a lot of work. Then the very most important thing from this talk is we need another maintainer. It's just the two of us at the moment. We would like to have at least 3 people so that we can have some rotation with 2 LTSs and we can have some backup. We reduce the bus factor. So if there's anybody here right now or later on that would like to help us and volunteer for this effort, we guarantee amazing perks, fantastic pay. Please join us.
We'll get the t-shirts made.
Yes,
promise.
Yes. Yeah. Finally, what can we do to make LTS better? So if there's anybody here who deploys LTS for their customers and you have any comments to give us, something we could do better, something we should stop doing, something that we are not doing that we should be doing, please let us know now or later on via email, in person, doesn't matter. We are here to help the community and the releases know your customers.
Yeah, just one thing on the validation as well. So we're to try and make sure the right people get the right messages. We've created a kind of a list of validation contacts for companies. So if you want to be on that, either ping me or Luca and we can add you to that or send a patch. So yeah, another question that came up was about the LTS release cadence. And so we have 3 master release cadences, or 3 master releases, and then we have an LTS. So I'm not sure we have enough resources to say should we have another LTS, but and the LTS we have every year and it lasts for 2 years. So there's always 2 in parallel. So if anybody has any comments or good ideas about that or things that should change, we'd be
Just got
happy to hear
asked
them.
once, I think there's a question there.
Okay.
We got asked once to extend 1611 for 1 extra year, but then when we asked for, a commitment to validation efforts, then that kind of died. So, and that was just once. If anybody thinks these LTSs should live for longer than 2 years and can offer the help to do that, we are happy to try and help. That's a fair comment. Now, the problem with the feature velocity and the development velocity we have in this project is that after 2 years, it becomes, even just after 1 year, it becomes quite hard to backport stuff. So the effort required is not linear, it actually increases. Especially the help from the developers that do the patches will need to increase a lot.
Of DPDK, the effort is the same. So
Exactly,
you're
precisely.
forcing me to upgrade every 2nd year rather than every 4th year.
Yeah.
And you're pushing that
Well, can I ask the
that
question?
work onto all the consumers instead of pushing it into the LTS release.
Precisely.
Can,
That is
can
a
I ask
very-
the question, why are you upgrading after 2 years? Because you want the bug fixes? You want to continue on with something that's supported?
Probably.
Or is there new features that you want in that next LTS?
Well, DPDK is pretty mature now. Not really, but mature enough. We're only using the basic
mean?
features. So it's usually not because I want new features. It's just
yeah.
if there's a new PMD or something, or I don't know, we prefer not to update. But
Okay, so I mean, that's,
if there's a CVE, we might have to update. And then suddenly we're forced to go into a lot of effort to do the update.
but that's an interesting point in the context of the next discussion.
Yeah.
Because if there was stability, ABI stability between subsequent LTSs, then potentially you could jump onto that one and have another 2 years support without any integration changes. Okay, maybe you'd have to revalidate, but you shouldn't have to change your code. So that's.
Yeah.
But thank you for the comment.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think we
Yeah.
are.
This is Helin from Intel. So I'd ask you guys to think about the customer need, the user need. Like we still need stick to the LTS version, but we want new features in the non-LTS version. How can we address that requirement? Thanks.
Okay. I
You
mean,
want the cake and eat it then.
yeah. Exactly.
I think, as Kevin just said, having a stable API and ABI over a longer period of time might help with that. Because when we started, we said that there's two types of users, those that want all the new features and don't care about stability, and those that want the stability. But maybe within that, between the users that want stability, there's two kinds. There's the kind like Debian, where no changes need to happen, apart from the most important bug fixes and CVEs and so on, and that's what the LTS is a good candidate for. But there's also those users that want stability in the sense they don't want to spend engineering time to change their application to keep up with the API changes. So perhaps the next talk will be a good answer to those questions.
I have a question for the audience. How many people are shipping non-LTS to their customers, like deployment types, non-LTS? Anybody? I'll buy them coffee. One? Thomas, yourself? No, 1, 2. Okay.
3, 4.
Okay,
Yep.
so there are some.
You need to buy a lot of coffee, I guess.
Okay.
On the other hand, maybe who ships LTS releases to their customers? Who ships LTS releases to their customers? You ship to everybody. Okay.
Okay.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, really, people, the big thing is the validation. Okay, so I mean, if we put in every release who's validated. So what I would say is, if you're using something and you see it's not validated there, you need to talk to whoever you're getting DPDK from and ask them to try and help. And it's so much easier. Just run a few tests on your use cases, and then we can make sure it doesn't have regression for you or your customers. If it happens afterwards, it's a much bigger problem for everybody.
Any other comments, questions, heckles? Maybe. You mean IBM, right?
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
I think we're done. Thank you.